Let's look at the relationship between the gradients of two perpendicular lines. Perpendicular lines are lines that are at right angles to each other. Let's look at the pink line here, pink reddish line. What is the gradient of that line? The gradient is the number in front of the x. So in this case, just put yourself a 1 in there so you don't get confused. The gradient of the pink line is -1/2. Let's look at the aqua line. The gradient is the thing in front of the x, so the gradient of the aqua line is 2. So that's the gradient of the lines. So we can't say that they have the same gradient, but look what happens if we multiply the gradient of the pink line times by the gradient of the aqua line. So we're multiplying -1/2 by 2, or 2 over 1. The 2's can cancel, and the gradients, when we multiply the two gradients together, the gradients give us -1. So that's the little rule down here. If two lines are perpendicular to each other, then the product of their gradients, when we multiply their gradients together, we get -1. So a specific example wants us to show that these two lines are perpendicular to each other. So I will call line 1 y equals -5x plus 2, and line 2 5y minus x plus 15 is equal to 0. To work out if they are perpendicular to each other, we need to find out their gradients. The first line is relatively easy. The gradient is the thing in front of the x, because this line is in the form y equals mx plus c. And if the line is in the form y equals mx plus c, then the m stands for the gradient. So in this case, the gradient of this line is -5. A little more work needs to be done for this second line. It is not in the form y equals mx plus c, so we need to change it into that form. So we want just y on the left-hand side and any other terms on the right-hand side. So I'm going to subtract 15, so that cancels. So I'm going to subtract 15. So 5y subtract x is equal to -15. If I add x, then the x's cancel. So I'm going to add x here. So now I've got 5y is equal to -15 plus x. I can change the order and write that, and I think that'll make it easier for you. And just remember, the sign in front goes with the term. So the sign in front stays with that term. The sign in front of the x stays there. Now we still haven't finished. It's not in the form y equals mx plus c. What we need to do is divide this by 5, so we just get y, and we divide this by 5. So y is equal to x divided by 5, subtract 15 divided by 5. I've just split that up into two fractions. So we can say y equals x over 5, subtract 3, because that cancels to 3. So what is the gradient? The gradient is the thing with the x. Put a little 1 there to make it easier for you. So the gradient is the thing, the number with the x, so the gradient is 1 over 5. So for our first line, the gradient is -5. For our second line, the gradient is 1 over 5. If these lines are perpendicular, when we multiply the gradients together, we will get -1. So let's see. -5, and we can put that over 1, times by the gradient of the second line. Cancel, cancel, yes. When we multiply the two gradients together, we get -1. So these two lines are perpendicular to each other. So as gradient 1 times by gradient 2 is equal to -1, the lines are perpendicular to each other. So the key point here, perpendicular lines, when we multiply the two gradients together, we get -1.